Hello and welcome to another episode of Nutanix Weekly, the only podcast on the internet that brings you the best of Nutanix along with our real world experiences. We like to call it content with context. And we do that by finding the best stuff on the internet to bring to you in terms of news in the Nutanix ecosphere. I'm your host, Phil Sellers. I'm the practice director here at XenTegra for Modern Data Center. And Nutanix, of course, is just one of our partners here, one of our leading partners from a data center perspective. And I couldn't bring you a podcast by just droning on by myself. So I've got to have some guests. My co-hosts here today, first up is Chris Calhoun, one of our solutions architect, former Nutanix sales engineer, and all around good guy with a shiny head.
Yeehaw.
Chris has just celebrated his first full year with Nutanix, or excuse me, with XenTegra, after he joined us from Nutanix, and it's been a fun year. Can you believe it's only been a year? Because it does actually feel like we've been working together longer.
It definitely does. I definitely feel like this is a family for this crew anyway. You know, we look after each other. We work hard together, arm in arm, looking for best possible solutions for customers and trying to just position what we think is the best solution for their overall success. And I think that that's really what's been fun for all of us. We've got different perspectives and different viewpoints, but in the end, we all realize that we're fighting for the right purpose. And that's a good thing for sure.
Well, and it's not just the Three Musketeers on this podcast. It's how we like to work with our customers too, right? We like to be arm in arm with them, trying to make sure that we're meeting their needs and that they get the right outcomes at the end of the day.
Yes, sir.
Which leads me to the other co-host today, our third Musketeer, Andy Greene, also a former Nutanix sales engineer and former Cohesity sales engineer. Andy, how long have you been with Nutanix now?
Or even XenTegra.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I got Nutanix on my mind. It's Nutanix Weekly.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's been over 10 months. So I'm approaching that 1 year mark as well.
Yeah. It's funny. You joined us right as I think we were making travel plans for you to go to our sales kickoff before you were actually officially on the payroll. So you got to spend time with us. We're already planning the next sales kickoff next January. So it's going to be exciting to have you guys both go through that full cycle again with us with a lot more perspective and a little more time under your belt as an XenTegra employee.
Definitely looking forward to it.
So as always, we're trying to bring you the best news from the Nutanix ecosphere. And today we wanted to talk a little bit about backup and recovery. And this time specifically for Nutanix Prism. So the name of the blog post we're going to be talking about today is Enhanced Backup and Restore for Nutanix Prism. It was written by Abhinav Mathur and Ruhai Segal, Nutanix employees. It's available out on nutanix.com/blog. And the published date was July 22nd, 2025. But we're going to dive right into this. So we're talking about Nutanix Prism Central, and it's a pretty important part of the overall Nutanix deployment. So Chris, for anyone that's not overly familiar with Nutanix Prism Central, it's more than just the way that you license your clusters today. What else is Prism Central, and what does it represent for a customer and their Nutanix infrastructure?
Prism Central is the overarching manager of managers, is the way that it was originally discussed with me and relayed to me. And that's the way I would share it with potential customers, is that the idea is, and if you want to parallel that with something that they probably already know, that would be vCenter. Mm-hmm. But it's so much more. And that's really where the idea around the need for a backup and that continuous timing of that backup is something really important. But anyway, not to jump ahead, Prism Central is the overarching management of your Nutanix environment. I didn't say Nutanix cluster, I said Nutanix environment because it manages not only a single cluster, but multiple clusters.
Mhm.
So it is that single pane of glass view into your full scope environment, whether it's on-prem, you've got edge deployed Nutanix clusters, or even clusters in the public cloud for NC2, as it's called, whether it's Azure, AWS, or GCP. The ability there to have a single view of your full scope Nutanix environment is so crucial, not only for, you can even look at it as day-to-day management, but you can do that within Prism Element, which is at each individual cluster level. But because all of these management duties roll up into Prism Central, that becomes the brain of brains or the master of the cluster. And it's really key to several functions of roles-based access. And to me, as an engineer, some of the key concepts are, and just want to directly jump to it, is capacity runway. That's something that this time of year, and depending on when this gets released, a lot of businesses are working on their business plans for next year and trying to forecast their budget. And I remember my days pre-Nutanix, and it was, hey, what do you need for next year's budget? It's a shot in the dark, it's a rub your magic 8 ball of trying to figure out what the expectation and what the budget would look like for next year. So the capacity runway really gives you perspective on trend analysis of each cluster, consistency of, hey, if you continue to increase and use your resources of CPU, compute, RAM, et cetera, and storage in the same fashion, then here's the growth model that you can expect. But Nutanix does one better. It even says, okay, if this is the trend, then at this point in the future, whether it's 2 months, 3 months, or you're planning for a new workload, that's really something that no other technology can give built into the platform is, hey, what do you expect to grow? Give me some more detail and I'll help model your specific data. So there's a lot more to that, but to me, that is a big feature within Prism Central that I think is ultimately a key benefit just right out of the gate. So I know that was a long answer, but it's a specific focus on one of the, I think, real niche type benefits to the Nutanix platform. And it's not only for one cluster, it's for all clusters. So that's really a key talking point.
So manager of managers, very similar to vCenter, but also pretty different than vCenter. And
True.
I'm curious, Andy, what are some of the things that make Prism Central different than vCenter that folks might know today?
Well, I think top of mind for me is just that in the VMware world, without vCenter, you can't build a cluster, right? With Nutanix, we have that ability to build a Nutanix cluster and manage it through the local cluster manager, which is called Prism Element. And Prism Element is being served from the Nutanix software on each of the nodes inside of that cluster, so it tends to be very resilient and always available for us. Prism Central builds on that, and it brings a lot of additional functionality around self-service. There's some really good functionality around reporting that's built in, and as Chris mentioned before, this is more of a global view of all of the Nutanix instances that you might be managing. So reporting at that level, customizable dashboards that allow you to really drill into the information that a particular user might want to see as soon as they log into their Prism Central instance. Your security operations team, your IT managers, your IT admins, IT leaders, they may all have a very different view of what they want to see in there. And there are also some really good tools built in around resource inefficiency detection, right sizing your workloads so that we can get the most out of the hardware that we've purchased, as well as low code, no code operations. I would say that Prism Central, especially with the NCM functionality, brings a lot of additional features that are bring a lot of value to those IT organizations that are out there using it.
Yeah. So two critical things that I heard you say. One is, you've got lots of metadata across all of these different clusters you're managing. As Chris pointed out, you've got the ability to see that global view. As you pointed out, Andy, you've got a cluster, whether you have Prism Central or not, because that exists through native capabilities within Nutanix. So that's different. But that metadata is what really powers a lot of the other things you discussed in terms of capacity for runway, overall reporting, and some of the other key features. Second big thing here is you mentioned NCM, Nutanix Cloud Management. That's another licensing SKU. It's another product. It runs in Prism Central, but it turns on additional functionality and features within your environment. That's another critical thing. So Prism Central is not something you have to license to have. It actually is your function today of applying licenses to your clusters once they're built. You license those through Prism Central, and it provides those overarching services that don't fit necessarily in a single cluster, but need to run and manage across multiple clusters. So little different paradigm shift. But when we talk about metadata, backups become a critical part of the discussion. So now that we understand a little bit of what Prism Central is, the role that it plays, what's this release about and what's the news here? Chris, I think I'm going to throw it to you. What are we talking about here in terms of backup and restore for Nutanix Prism?
With the latest release of the Nutanix software version 7.3, basically there are now customizable recovery points for point-in-time backups for Prism Central. That's really the key. Previously, prior to version 7.3, the RPO that could be set was at a 2-hour minimum. Now it's customizable from 1 hour, 2 hour, up to 24 hours. And really there's intervals in between. And then what that does is for those customers that have either, we'll say, outage windows or maintenance windows that they have a shorter time of, they have less than 2 hours to work with, we need that 1 hour window available so that they can have that backup during that continuous planning and backing up of Prism Central. The key here is not only being able to back it up to several choices or a couple of choices, Nutanix Object Storage, which is we'll say the on-prem local S3 compatible storage that Nutanix offers, or even something like an AWS S3 bucket if you want to do it offsite so that you have external backup of your Prism Central metadata.
Yeah, so when we talk about Prism Central, you mentioned it's a point-in-time backup, which is, I think, almost like a snapshot, right? It's a point in time. That's very snapshot-related technology. There's also a second type of backup available. So point in time is going to use S3 compatible. At first, it was AWS only. And you're saying with 7.3, the new functionality is now we can use Nutanix objects as a destination for those backups. There's a second type as well, Andy, and that's called continuous backups. Where do continuous backups go?
Continuous backups go to one of the Nutanix clusters, one or more of the Nutanix clusters that are being managed by that Prism Central instance.
And how do those two differ, point in time versus continuous backup?
Well, continuous is really streaming any changes that you might make in real time, whereas if we're doing the point in time backups based on an RPO, now we've got that ability to choose the point in time that we're backing that up. So it may be 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, up to 12 or 24 hours. So realistically, what one is capturing those changes in real time, whereas the other is just capturing it based off that RPO that we've configured.
So, Chris, you mentioned it's configurable from an hour up to 24 hours with intervals in between. I'm curious, like, to me, why would you choose a longer or shorter? Why was it 2 hours for everybody? Okay.
I think to me, obviously, you've got to have a baseline of, you've got to decide initially where's a happy medium sweet spot where customers know that they need to capture data, but also not also flood the network in the sense that it doesn't constantly need to have those replication changes circulating so that it's too chatty, to be quite honest, on the network. And I think that that's something to me that that's one of those where Prism Central, if you're going to make day-to-day, we'll say CRUD, which are VM specific changes, create, update, delete, that type thing, to your VM environment, sometimes those may be done and still may be done at the Prism element level. So think about regionally, there may be clusters where local staff needs to just operate on that one specific instance of Prism element. Well, that data will obviously stay in sync, but the Prism Central needs to have the most recent data so that at some point in time, those changes are captured, PC updates, and then you have a point in time backup, but it doesn't flood the network. And that's, to me, one of the key benefits now of, hey, this is allowing you as a customer to decide what's best. So I think that that's really something that stands out to me as a benefit here, is always listening to the flexibility of where customers need adjustments or to help them fit better for the business.
Yeah, and Chris talked a lot about the amount of data that we're transmitting over the network, but that same amount of data is also hitting our cloud storage, for instance. So, when we think about the cost of data, we always want to be conscientious of how much data we're sending up there and how much data we're retaining.
Yeah, because it's not free. That's one of the things about cloud storage is we pay by the drip, we pay by the metering, and so it can add up. And that's sometimes one of the bigger shocks for our customers, our clients, is getting the cloud bill at the end of the month. Um, this is all great, but what all is actually included in these backups? Andy, can you kind of give us some idea of what we're capturing in a Prism Central backup?
Yeah, I think what we've seen over time is that more and more services have moved up into Prism Central. So with that, it kind of makes sense that we would want to protect it, just like any other critical component of our infrastructure. So think about things like your Nutanix disaster recovery policies, any types of AHV-based VLANs, virtual switch configurations as well. If you're using Flow Virtual Networking and you've created virtual private clouds or VPCs, these are all things that can be backed up as part of that Prism Central backup as well. Legacy flow network security, intelligent operations, VM management, cluster management, and then tied into a lot of these, we see our clients using categories, right? We're creating that key value pair of categories inside of Prism Central to categorize our VMs and then do things like apply those security policies. So we can back up the categories. I think, Philip, you may have called out earlier that licensing is now it's all handled through Prism Central. So we're backing up all of the licenses that we've applied, as well as I mentioned earlier, reporting being built in through the NCM feature set. So where any templates that we've created around reporting, we're backing that up our Nutanix file storage configuration, Nutanix object configuration, really a lot of different features, a lot of different services that have moved up inside of that Prism Central construct. Now we're backing it up, and we're getting that protection from, for all of the same reasons that we would back up our virtual machines, right? If we have a network outage, if we have some type of natural disaster that hits the data center, we're gaining that protection and the ability to very quickly recover our Prism Central instance, along with all the many hours of configuration that we might have put into that Prism Central.
Yeah, it's funny. I once had someone in my organization tell me that vCenter didn't matter. And I just about lost my lunch because I knew that I had notes and categories and tags and all of those things, all the metadata around those virtual machine workloads were in vCenter. And in the same way, Prism Central is carrying all that metadata. So it may be critical to the way that you back up, regardless of who your backup vendor is. It could be critical to just institutional knowledge. That metadata is really powerful at the end of the day. Whether it's how much CPU you've used over the last 6 months, or whether it's which group owns this. I've worked in large organizations, and sometimes playing whack-a-mole, trying to figure out who owns this application or who owns this server. So that becomes a critical institutional knowledge base for a lot of organizations, stored right next to the virtual machines where they're running. So this is great. So now we have more options on the table. We've got continuous backup available, targeting a Prism element instance for all of our Prism Central data. We've got point-in-time backups, which have supported AWS S3 for a while for point-in-time, and now support S3 object storage. Where's somewhere that a customer could get Nutanix object storage? Do they have to be running it on-prem? I mean, that's obviously one option. You could be running your own maybe backup cluster next to your primary clusters. Where else could they possibly get Nutanix objects as a service?
Maybe. Boy, you lobbed it up, the softball. How about XenTegra's managed service?
That's right, folks. We do. That is one of our many Nutanix-powered abilities here. We do have Nutanix Object as a service. So, if you're looking for, really good restorability and things like that, we can run that right next to maybe where you're storing your VM backups. And I think that's a critical call out as we kind of close out the discussion. We're talking about Prism Central, the metadata, and all of the configuration for Prism Central. We're not talking about the workloads. We're not talking about things running in NKP or running in virtual machines. Still need backup software for those. This is just really protecting that Prism Central layer. And so it's very complementary, and it's something you shouldn't overlook or assume as being backed up by traditional backups. It's important to be informed and to make sure you've got a good plan for where your Prism Central backups are being stored. Guys, I appreciate the conversation. We've taken a relatively short blog post, but important blog post, and added a lot of context around it today. I really appreciate both of your insights. I learned a thing or two. This is something I haven't done before. I haven't targeted S3 storage. I've always backed it up to a Prism element. So new capabilities, it's always changing. And for everybody listening, reiterate, this is part of the 7.3 release. And if you want this, there are embedded links and things, and you can always test out Nutanix Prism Central if you haven't seen it already by going to the free test drive site. That's available for free on demand at Nutanix.com. Well, guys, appreciate your insights. And for everybody listening, thanks for hanging out with us. And we hope you'll be here for another podcast soon. Have a great day.